Welcome to another deep dive. You guys have given us a fascinating set of articles from the Limerick archives, and they all focus on a single individual. Judge Richard Adams, County Court Judge of Limerick, for quite a while, from 1894 until his death in 1908.
Wow.
But, this isn't your typical legal deep dive.
Right.
We're going beyond just the courtroom summaries to explore this man's personality.
Interesting.
And get this, some sources say his court sessions were as entertaining as go to the theater.
Oh, wow. That's something.
So tell me, what's your take on Judge Adams, just from reading through these articles?
Well, it's fascinating how these articles depict Judge Adams. He was known as like this really sharp wit, and he had this unconventional approach to justice, and he really loved his native Cork.
Yeah, and his nickname was Dick Adams.
Oh, yeah.
Not exactly what you'd expect for a judge, right?
Not at all.
It makes you wonder how authority was perceived back then.
Oh, it really challenges our modern perception of judicial decorum. Maybe this informality contributed to his popularity.
Yeah.
There's even a story about a visitor to Limerick, and this visitor was told that they didn't need to go to the theater because Judge Adams' court was the best show in town.
I love that.
Are you imagining?
You imagine that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't all just jokes and entertainment, though, right?
Right.
He was known for finding these really practical, fair solutions, even if it meant kind of stepping outside the traditional courtroom.
Totally.
Like, for instance, there's this story about him settling this water rights dispute by holding court in a ditch.
Yeah. He wanted everyone to literally see eye to eye on the issue.
Yeah.
What better way than to bring them right to the source of the contention?
Right there in the ditch.
Right there in the ditch.
Yeah. And it's not just about theatrics, though, right?
Well, no.
It speaks to a time when legal proceedings were less formal and more about finding practical solutions.
Right. What do you think? Did that make justice more accessible?
I mean, it's an interesting thought, for sure. It seems like he wanted to cut through all the legalese and get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
In a way that everyone could understand. And that wasn't just a one-time thing either.
No.
There's another story about him holding an open-air court session on a Sunday to resolve a boundary disagreement between two farms.
He literally sat on a fence to deliver his judgment.
Wow.
Yeah. And this incident became so famous that it even inspired a cartoon all the way in Australia.
It's amazing to think how a local judge from Limerick could capture the attention of people across the globe.
Yeah.
It speaks to his personality, but also to the power of these really unconventional approaches to justice.
Right.
But it wasn't all ditches and fences, right?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Judge Adams also had this really strong sense of fairness and compassion.
Totally. You see this in his rulings on land tenancy. There was a case where he reduced the rent for a tenant who had significantly improved the land he was renting.
Which contrasts with his disapproval of those who neglected their farms.
Right.
It seems like he views land as more than just property, like it was a responsibility.
Yes.
It was a vital part of the community.
Yeah.
How might this compare to modern views on land ownership?
That's a great question to consider.
Yeah.
It certainly suggests like a deeper connection to the land, a sense of stewardship that may be less prevalent today.
And his commitment to fairness extended beyond human interactions as well.
Oh, absolutely.
He was a fierce advocate for animal welfare.
Yeah.
In one article, he even compares those who mistreat animals to the English invaders who had historically exploited Ireland. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement for the time.
That is a really strong statement.
He didn't just rely on emotional appeals either, right?
No, not at all.
He often drew on these historical and philosophical arguments, and he liked to link animal rights back to figures like St. Francis of Assisi, who's, known for his love and compassion for all creatures.
Right.
He even condemned those who tried to burn a man alive in an arson case, calling it cruel and wicked.
What?
Clearly, under that wit and humor, Judge Adams took justice very seriously.
Absolutely.
But let's kind of delve deeper into that wit, because the sources are full of these fantastic anecdotes about his courtroom exchanges.
Oh, yeah, the courtroom gems.
Yeah.
There's one about a time when someone questioned his legal knowledge. And instead of getting defensive, he fired back with, "Look here, that's slander of me and my business, trade, and profession, and it is actionable without proof of special damage, so look out for a writ."
I can just imagine it delivered with that signature wit.
Oh, yeah.
It's like he could just disarm any situation with a clever quip.
Totally.
And then there's that story of the man who sued for the loss of his whiskers.
Oh, yeah. Apparently a mischievous neighbor had cut them off.
Oh, my.
And Judge Adams turned the whole thing into this comedic lesson in both law and humor.
Yeah.
And this case became quite famous, highlighting his knack for making even mundane legal matters captivating.
He even had some pointed commentary about plumbers, saying they should be tortured for their shoddy work. I'm guessing that was said in jest.
Of course. But it does reveal his willingness to poke fun at even the most mundane aspects of life.
But perhaps the most peculiar aspect of Judge Adams' life is his alleged resemblance to King Edward VII.
Oh, yes.
And there was even a royal command involved.
Really?
While he was in Hamburg, Germany, he was approached by the king's equerry and politely asked to stop wearing his signature tall hat and frock coat.
Why?
It seems the king was tired of being mistaken for Judge Adams.
Oh, no.
And even receiving greetings meant for the judge. It makes you wonder, did they really look that much alike?
I know. Did they really?
And the story gets even more intriguing. When King Edward VII visited Ireland in 1903, the Dublin Daily Express reported that Judge Adams was conveniently out of the country.
Oh, wow.
They even jokingly suggested that Adams could have served as a stand-in for the king during his visit to the Dublin slums.
A stand-in.
It all adds a layer of mystery to this already colorful character.
It does.
Almost like something out of a comedic play. So we've kind of established that Judge Adams was a man of many talents, wit, legal acumen, and apparently a royal doppelganger.
It seems so.
But his story goes beyond the courtroom before he was a judge. He had a rather eclectic career path, starting in his beloved Cork.
Yeah, his love for Cork was a constant throughout his life.
Yeah.
He often spoke of it fondly. He even compared it favorably to all the European capitals he visited.
Imagine that a man who'd seen the world, yet his heart remained in his hometown.
Wow.
It speaks volumes about his character and connection to his roots.
It does.
But before he became a judge, what was he up to?
Well, believe it or not, he started as a journalist.
Really?
First at the Cork Examiner, then as a leader writer for the Freeman's Journal, a prominent nationalist newspaper.
So his way with words was evident even before he entered the courtroom.
Yeah.
I mean, that journalistic background likely contributed to his eloquence and ability to captivate an audience, whether it was a jury or a room full of dinner guests.
Oh, absolutely. But before his legal career took off, there was this brief and less successful stint as a bank clerk.
Oh, yeah. And this is where the story of the banknotes comes in.
Ah, yes. A classic Judge Adams anecdote.
He was tasked with opening letters containing banknotes that were sent in two halves. And his job was to gum them together.
Oh, no.
Which he frequently did incorrectly.
He did.
Apparently, he often joked about gumming the wrong halves together, causing a bit of chaos at the bank.
That's hilarious.
It's a humorous image, and it speaks to a certain absent-mindedness.
Yeah.
A quality perhaps not well suited for the meticulous world of banking.
Right.
But that same absent-mindedness might have contributed to his charm and his ability to see the humor in everyday situations.
Totally.
It's a good reminder that our perceived flaws can sometimes be assets in disguise.
Absolutely.
And this journey from journalist to bank clerk to lawyer to judge is quite remarkable.
It is.
It suggests this constant desire for intellectual stimulation and new challenges.
Yeah.
And there's a recurring theme of him thriving in unconventional spaces, from ditch courts to whisker lawsuits.
Yeah, he really did.
It seems like he always found a way to make his mark, injecting his personality and humor into everything he did.
Absolutely. And you know what's so interesting is that Judge Adams represents a time when legal proceedings were more accessible and entertaining for the public.
It really does make you think, how has the perception of law and justice changed since then?
That's a great question.
So we've learned that Judge Adams was far more than just a judge.
Right.
He was a wit, a storyteller, a champion of fairness, and a man who deeply loved his homeland. But there's so much more to uncover about his story, and we have a lot more material to go through. So join us as we continue to explore his legacy in part 2 of this deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and times of Judge Richard Adams.
It's good to be back.
We've been exploring, his colorful personality and unconventional approach to justice, but now I think let's turn our attention to some specific cases that really reveal his legal acumen and commitment to fairness.
Okay, so what kind of cases are we talking about?
Well, there's this one murder trial that really stands out. It's fascinating not just for the legal arguments, but for the strategic brilliance that Judge Adams displays. So during an adjournment, he had this chance encounter with the judge's crier.
The judge's crier?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who offered some unsolicited advice.
Okay.
Mr. Adams, don't call any witnesses mine now.
Hold on. The judge's crier. That's an interesting detail. Was there something more to this advice?
It seems so, the crier was known to be close to the judge. So Judge Adams kind of interpreted this as a subtle hint about the judge's leanings in the case.
So did he follow the crier's advice?
He did. In a bold move, he chose not to call any witnesses.
Wow.
A decision that surprised many.
Yeah.
Instead, he opted to close the case with a compelling speech, relying solely on his oratory skills to persuade the jury.
Okay, that's a bold strategy, but did it pay off?
Well, there's a twist.
Around.
The judge, in his charge to the jury, unexpectedly focused on the fact that the defense hadn't called any witnesses, implying that they were hiding something.
So it sounds like the crier's advice backfired.
Yeah, what happened next is after the case concluded, Judge Adams confronted the crier, asking why he had given such misleading advice. And the crier's response was simple.
What was it?
Because, Mr. Adams, I very much dislike perjury.
So the crier was trying to prevent false testimony.
It seems so.
Yeah, it's a fascinating ethical dilemma.
Yeah, you have this duty to defend your client, but also this moral obligation to uphold the truth.
What do you think this says about Judge Adams' approach to law?
It shows his commitment to ethical conduct, even if it meant potentially jeopardizing his client's case. He wasn't just playing a role. He was deeply invested in the integrity of the legal process.
It's another example of Judge Adams defying expectations.
Yeah, he was full of surprises.
But beyond these individual cases, what about his broader impact on the legal landscape?
Well, his rulings often reflected a deep understanding of social issues and a desire to create a more just and equitable society. Take his decisions in land tenancy cases, for instance. We already discussed his belief in fairness for both landlords and tenants.
Right. Reducing rent for those who improved the land and criticizing those who neglected it.
Exactly. He saw land as a responsibility, not just property.
Did this perspective influence his legal decisions in a broader sense?
Absolutely. There are numerous articles detailing his rulings in land disputes, and they consistently demonstrate a commitment to finding fair and practical solutions, often taking into account the social and economic context of the situation.
It's interesting to consider how his personal values shaped his legal interpretations, and we can't overlook his outspoken views on animal welfare, which were quite progressive for his time.
Yeah, he didn't just see animal cruelty as a minor offense. He viewed it as a serious ethical transgression. In one case, he even compared those who mistreat animals to the English invaders who had historically exploited Ireland.
That's a powerful analogy. It suggests that for him, animal welfare was tied to larger questions of justice and power.
Exactly, and he didn't just rely on emotional appeals. He often drew on historical and philosophical arguments linking animal rights back to figures like St. Francis of Assisi.
So we see a recurring theme with Judge Adams, using his platform to spark conversation and challenge conventional thinking both in and outside the courtroom.
Precisely, he was more than just a judge. He was a social commentator, a champion of the underdog, and of course a master of wit and humor.
But it wasn't always smooth sailing. He did face criticism.
He did.
For his unconventional views and his tendency to inject humor into serious matters.
There was that incident at a lecture on the Irish language revival where his jokes were perceived as insensitive.
It raises the question of when humor is appropriate, especially in culturally sensitive contexts.
It's a reminder that humor, while often a powerful tool, can sometimes be misconstrued or cause offense. And it adds another layer of complexity to Judge Adams's legacy.
He was both celebrated and scrutinized, a testament to the impact he had on his community. But how do we reconcile these contrasting views of him?
Perhaps the key is recognizing the multifaceted nature of his personality. He was a complex individual with a strong sense of justice, a deep love for his homeland, and a mischievous wit that sometimes landed him in hot water.
It seems like he was a man who lived life on his own terms, embracing both the serious and the lighthearted. But there's still more to his story, isn't there?
Yes, there are a few more intriguing aspects of his life that we haven't yet explored. Let's delve into those as we continue our deep dive in the final part of this episode.
Well, we've been on quite a journey with Judge Richard Adams, haven't we? From ditch courts to royal resemblances, we've seen so many sides of this intriguing figure.
We've examined his legal career, his social commentary, his deep love for Cork, and of course his unmatched wit. But you've provided us with such a rich collection of sources. There are a few threads we haven't yet pulled on, like his involvement in politics, for example.
Yeah, right. It seems like he may have had some political aspirations, even though he never actually held elected office. He was a member of the National Liberal Club, which, for our listeners who might not be familiar, was a prominent political organization at the time, known for advocating for social reform and Irish home rule.
And some articles even suggest that he might have considered running for parliament?
Can you imagine Judge Adams giving one of his witty speeches on the floor of the House of Commons?
It's a tantalizing thought, but in the end it seems that his true passion lay in the legal world, though his involvement with the National Liberal Club does speak to his engagement with the larger social and political issues of his day.
Absolutely. And speaking of his engagement with the community, it's clear he wasn't just this solitary figure in the courtroom, right?
Right.
He was an active member of various social clubs and organizations.
You can see this in his participation in events organized by the legal profession, where he would often entertain colleagues with anecdotes from his career. He was also a popular figure at the National Liberal Club, known for his captivating storytelling and quick wit.
It seems his humor and charisma extended far beyond the courtroom. He was a man who brought joy and laughter to those around him, regardless of the setting.
Yeah, and again, that brings us back to this idea of accessibility.
Right.
Not just in terms of legal proceedings, but in his personality as well.
Right. It's this human side of Judge Adams that makes him so compelling. He wasn't just a brilliant legal mind. He was a man who connected with people on a personal level, a man of warmth, humor, and genuine connection.
Absolutely.
As we near the end of our deep dive into the life of Judge Richard Adams, it's clear he was a truly remarkable individual, a brilliant jurist, a champion of fairness, a social commentator, and above all, a man who embraced life with this unique blend of wit and wisdom.
His legacy extends beyond the legal annals of Limerick. It lives on in the hearts and minds of those who remember his humor, his compassion, and his unwavering commitment to justice.
So what can we take away from all of this? What does the life of Judge Adams offer us, the listener, today?
Perhaps it's a reminder that even in the most serious of professions, there's room for humanity, for humor, for a touch of the unconventional, and that sometimes it's those who defy easy categorization who leave the most lasting impact.
It's also a testament to the power of individual personality. Judge Adams, with his unique blend of wit and wisdom, challenged conventions, sparked conversations, and left an undeniable mark on his community and on the legal landscape of his time. It makes you wonder, what kind of mark will we leave on the world?
That's something to think about. And until our next deep dive together, may you find inspiration in the unexpected corners of history, and may your own life be filled with a good dose of laughter and a commitment to making the world a fairer place.